Welcome to our UX Brown Bag / Tech Talk. I'm Irene Au. I run the user experience team, and I'd like to introduce to you Aza Raskin. Aza gave his first talk on user interface at age 10. For those of you who don't know, he is Jeff Raskin's son. And Jeff Raskin's one of these user interface gurus that most of us in the industry know about. But and anyway, we're in good company. So at 17, he was talking and consulting internationally. At 19, he co-authored a physics textbook because he was too young to buy alcohol. And at 21, he started drinking alcohol and co-founded Humanized. And 2 years later, Aza founded Songza.com. It's a minimalist music search engine that had over 1 million song plays during its first week of operation. And after Humanized, he was sucked into Mozilla, and he is now head of user experience for Mozilla Labs. And in another life, he has done dark matter research at both Tokyo University and the University of Chicago. What you don't know is that he graduated with honors in math and physics. And when not working, he enjoys music, playing music, and punning. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce to you Aza, and he's going to talk about Don't Make Me Click.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I'm sort of embarrassed, but I will say that when I talk, I do pontificate. Thank you. Yes, okay. That one is, I guess, being recorded, so that's going to go on the internet. Right, so don't make me click. So how many people here actually design interfaces? Cool. How many people here have never made a website? The same group. Wow, that's unusual. Normally, everybody sort of raises their hand, sometimes slowly when they're GeoCities people. Because most people, anytime you make something on the computer, right, that a human uses, you've made an interface. You've designed an interface. You need to be versed in the ideas of what makes an interface good. So I'm here to talk about Don't Make Me Click, which is a sort of play on the Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. And, well, I'll just get into it. So, oops, see if this is, there we go. So, since the very beginning of the web, right, way back in the primordial soups of Mosaic, there's been a fundamental web tension, right? On one hand, wow, this doesn't work very well. There we go. On one hand, there are pictures of your pets and pictures of your children, which are possibly the most boring thing possible to other people, possibly the most interesting thing possible to you. So on one hand of the fundamental web tension, where your website fits someplace in between, there's boring. And on the other side, there's the taser the gnome games, right? I've tasered that gnome I don't know how many times, and my mortgage rate still haven't gone down, but that's annoying, right? So the fundamental web tension is on the boring versus annoying thing, right? Your website falls someplace in between these two poles, right? So just a matter of where. So I've certainly seen a lot of boring and a lot of very annoying. And someplace in between, oh, right. As I said, I do all my presentations in Firefox because I'm now at Mozilla. And we had this idea for the blink tag so long ago. And everybody knows what the marquee tag is? Right? So do you know that you can put the marquee tag inside of the blink tag? Awesome. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Actually, you can put images in there too, and you can put it in the background, so your entire background of your screen can be scrolling, right? Which is like, and the thing that gets me, right, is that some engineer, probably a whole group of engineers, not only had to write this, but they had to write unit tests for this, right? And they spent, I'm sure, days, weeks, like working on making this, just, So I'm glad that we've gotten rid of the blink tag, more or less. So right in between boring and annoying, that's just right? And that's where you get websites which are actually useful. So we're going to figure out what exactly that is. And you sort of, Google, good job. There's Facebook, there's the iPod. I think Firefox does a very good job of sort of getting something which is very useful, but isn't boring per se, right? People go there and use it. And it isn't annoying, right? So there's sort of a move right now to cinematic user experiences. I don't know if you guys have been sort of following this, sort of the Pandora thing where things are zooming around. Apple's getting very fond of gratuitous zooming effects. And that's moving a little bit towards annoying. So the thing I'm most fond of saying is that to the interface, to the user, the interface is the product. I think this is really important, and I have a little parable which I sort of shortened down about Digger 2.0, otherwise known as a shovel. And this is the specification, right? And so that means there's a lot of time spent making the shovel, which is the back end, the thing you invest in, titanium plated with diamond bits. And then you have the UI, which is just the handle. And so what you normally get, of course, is that when you actually release, your shovel looks like this. So this is sort of funny, I guess. But the weird thing is that most people, especially in marketing, don't realize it. They think, hey, it's all about the features, not really about the experience, the product. So Bill Buxton has an incredibly good example of this, right? About to the user, the interface is the product, right? And he takes a picture of a bicycle and he puts it up. He says, this is not a very good advertisement for a bicycle. Then he shows another picture of a bicycle in sort of a cute pose and says, this also isn't, this is slightly better, it looks sort of Pixar-ish, but it's not a great marketing tool, right? People aren't going to buy your bicycle just for seeing this sort of picture. And then he shows a picture of a guy rushing through a stream, water everywhere, right? Mud everywhere, and you can't even see the bicycle, but boy, do you want it, right? That's the interface, right? The whole getting on, doing it, that's the product as an experience, right? That's what's important to the user, not the fact that it has, graphite leaded things on the inside. Oh, that's important too. So we come to the question of what is the best interface, right? We've just seen what a bad interface for a shovel is, so what's the best interface? And I'm going to be particularly bold here and say that on the very next slide, I'm going to show you the best interface, not just for a shovel. In fact, I'm not going to show you the best interface for a shovel, but for every product out there, right? It's a pretty bold statement. So I hope, gear your memories, prime them. And it's this. I always am tempted to put this slide intentionally left blank, but then it isn't. I always think it's sort of a meta quandary. But this is the best interface, right? Is no interface. If you don't even realize you're using something, that's great. And it's a little bit ironic. We're interaction designers, and the point of our job is to get rid of interaction. When we do our jobs very, very well, nobody even knows we were there. Sort of like these are not the droids you are looking for style of interface design. But it's true. If you notice the interface, that means you're thinking about the interface and not the thing you're trying to do. So this is the best interface. So what's better than this? Oh, by the way, so about the blank screen. Brendan Laurel, who's a research designer and interface designer and researcher, calls it NFI, and I don't swear normally, but I guess I take this opportunity, and she calls it no fucking interface. That is the best interface, right? It's pretty cool. So what's better than this? That. A hole, right? If anybody ever invents a shovel that's just a hole where you want it, please get me one. I really want it. But we'll come back to this, right? We'll come back to this. So the point of what I want to talk about today, the heart of it, again, is don't make me click. Don't force me to do things, and it's about interaction seduction. It's about us as designers falling into the trap of making things go whiz, bang, pop, having gizmos and gadgets on your desktop, having to click on things to get information, having icons instead of words. It's about the desire to make things look fancy, right? That is the seduction of interaction, because it looks cool. It looks awesome. And if you follow this path, what will you get? You'll get those annoying sort of splash screens. Everybody remembers the Flash splash screens that you wait, before you can see the content, please watch as I animate my title and morph it into somebody else's name, right? This is not useful, but that's where people sort of go, right? That's the seduction of interaction, sort of the television style of designing. So this probably looks familiar to some of you. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's nice. But maybe we can do better, right? Let's let the marketers in. This needs more interaction, right? Let's follow the interaction seduction. So what does search really do, right? We have all of this stuff wrapped up in search. We can calculate, track flights, track packages, search discography, find movies, maps, restaurants, locations, stock finance search. And there's a couple I'm missing, I'm sure. Yeah, weather, I think. Although you're not indicating that to your user, right? You need to sort of get out there, show all this sort of wealth of information that you have sitting inside of that box. So let's redesign it a little bit, right? So now we have search in there a whole bunch of times, Google in there. So this is great for SEO. I mean, this is beautiful, right? And now the user clearly can see the wealth of information in there. But guess what? That's really Web 1.0. So let's say Jacksify, right? Let's use our toolkits, and let's see what we can do. Check it out. Ready? I'm pretty proud of this one. Watch. Yeah, thank you. Ooh, right? Well, this is clearly less usable, but you've seen websites that look like this, right? Right? This is the scary thing. I've just tried to take the worst thing I could possibly imagine and wrap it up in just a little bit of interaction seduction. And we get this. And people do this all the time, right? Because you give people a really easy accordion widget, they will use it. And people will try to market it, right? That's how we got that silly Vista thing where you have that sort of 3D Rolodex. That was them saying, we need interaction. We need to do something that is better than, or at least looks as fancy as Expose. But we can't copy Expose. So we're going to do something interacty. And you get something that's the analogy of this, the analog of this. All right? But there's still too much text, right? Let's really give into that interaction seduction. So here we go. I have replaced, on the top, your links with beautiful iconography. Iconography, thank you. And now, not only is, so a lot of people say that icons are great because, then you don't have to localize. But what you're really getting are something like this sort of universal language which is equally unintelligible across every culture. And there are lots of examples where like this in English means stop, and someplace I think India it means something not so good. So that's sort of false even there, right? There's lots of dangers here, but even worse, just from an interaction standpoint, what does this require? Well, I don't really know what this globe means. I made these, and I still can't remember what they are. And now you have to mouse over them before you see anything, right? So what we've done is we've removed content. We've lowered the density of information on the screen. And this is all part of that sort of interaction seduction falling into it. All right, it's still too boring. Let's see what else we can do, right? I have this awesome toolkit. I can do fun things. And the marketers still want something cooler, something with more pizzazz. So check this out, okay? Instead of having that boring bar along the top, and that's not extensible anyway, what happens if you get like 25 products? Well, we can go like this. Yeah, exactly. Ooh, so now to find anything, we have to sort of scroll around. And then we can do our little searches here. And we've got the marketer's paradise, right? And again, this looks sort of cleaner, maybe, who knows. But we've all seen sites that look like this, Yahoo. Right? But this is interaction seduction. This is bad. And yet it happens all the time. Now, actually, interestingly enough, so you see this little widget here. Firefox 1.0 had tabs where when you open more and more and more tabs, they would just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And soon you couldn't really read them, but that was OK, because you'd remember that your tab was someplace up near 1.5 inches from the left side. You had this sort of mental mapping. Firefox 2.0 came around, and they introduced these little buttons on the left and right side so that as your tabs got smaller, they would stop at some point, and then you could scroll left and right. This meant you never really knew where your tabs were, because they'd always be hidden off the screen. They'd introduced interaction into their system. and it was bad. And in fact, when you look at the data, people open the same tab many more times with the new system because it's much easier to open up a new tab, type in a URL, than it is to find the original tab, right? So, this looks sexy and cool, and it's animated, and you know that it's a bad idea when you see it like this, but when it's just offset just a little bit into the real world, it becomes so easy to fall into that, we'll just add this little interaction, when you always need to be thinking about, hey, how can I remove interaction? What's the other way? So actually, I started a design competition, and we got something like 160 entries into it. And I'll show you later what one of the solutions to that tab problem was that I think is pretty cool. So what I like to say is that this is, people call this a RIA, or rich internet application. And I disagree. I really think this is an MIA, meaning it's a materialistic internet application. I also like to say it's an MIA because I really wish it was, as in missing in action. And what we really want, right, is a ZIA, or Zen internet application. And what's the thing about Zen? It's act without doing. Anybody that uses Quicksilver will see this sort of similarity popping up. And I don't know if you guys know, but the Quicksilver guy, Nicholas, is here at Google, so you can go seek him out. He doesn't like it, though. So we want to act without doing, right? So that when we come back here and look at Google, and you can type into that little box, and there's so much functionality hidden in there, well, that's really cool. This is sort of like an oasis of interaction, right? There's nothing to do. It's like you've been crawling across the desert full of the hulks and like the rusting carcasses of Web 2.0 companies with their AJAX frameworks. You arrive like, just a text box. How nice. Well, can we simplify Google at all? Can we try to figure out how to take that interaction and make it go away anymore? Well, it's going to be hard to do it for your actual search box. So you could get rid of I'm feeling lucky, but that's sort of like a cultural icon. It's great for April Fool's jokes. But what happens when we search? Maybe we can go the other way. So here's a search. Looks nice. I like your colors. Is there anything we can do here? First, let's give in to the interaction seduction. Go the other way for a second. Here's a little mock-up I did, and it, you have your related and videos, and you can search more. You get a big, nice image when you hover for detail. And oh yeah, if you don't like your search results, then you can go to previous or next. Not so good. Oh, I wonder if I'll have time. How long is this talk supposed to be? 1 hour? OK. I guess I'll do a brief aside into random access interfaces. Everybody here knows what random access memory is? Rather, people that don't make some sort of noise. Cool, wow. So there's sort of two ways of designing interfaces for things like spell check and search. Spell check. If you look at how Word does it, when it's not doing the little red underline, it sort of pops up a dialog box and moves you from one misspelled word to the next, to the next, to the next, right? That's actually not all that nice because, if you've ever tried to spell check code, you know that it's just going to highlight all the ones you don't want. In fact, you can't jump over any of them. It's pulling your locus of attention with it, right? And there's the other kind, the kinds you have in Gmail, where it just highlights the words that are misspelled, and you can go through and check them. Well, this is a difference between sort of a linear search and random access. You can go anywhere. So why do we hate voicemail so much? It's because you can't, your ears aren't random access. Your eyes are. So your ears, you're forced to listen to the whole thing, and you can't change with your ear what you're listening to. With your eyes, when you're reading something, you can skip over the parts you're not interested in. So this is the difference between random access and linear access interfaces. And why this sort of previous and next is so gross is because this is linear access, right? You're forced to go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. Whereas when you can just sort of see all the lists, you can jump through them. Anyway, it's random aside. All right, so back to the whole. What would be better than your current search results? Well, if you could just have the answer there already, right? You type it in. And actually, you guys do this. I was hoping to fault you for something, but couldn't get there. If you type in weather, it'll actually just sort of drop the weather in, right? So that's cool. That's actually getting towards the not giving you search results, but actually giving you the thing that you want in the first place. That's the lower interaction. So we'll come back in just a second to exactly what you guys can do to reduce interaction on the Google homepage. But first, why is reducing interaction good, right? It's because when interaction goes up, information density goes down. And when information density goes down, content goes down. And why are you users at your site in the first place? It's the content, right? They're going there to do something. When I was talking about that boring versus annoying, in that center, that useful bit was because people were presenting content in ways that wasn't getting in your way, right? And that's why people spend so long on Facebook. So your content goes down, and when your content goes down, your users go away. This is why reducing interaction is a good thing, because it's fundamentally getting back to making your users able to do their product, making your interface invisible. Yeah, not a good thing when that happens. So we want a Zia, right, for that search result. So we come here, and what's missing, right? We come down to the bottom, and now I have to do something. I've seen the 10 results, and I have to click on these little links, right? And they're actually semantically meaningless. They just mean go someplace further into the search history, right? And in fact, I actually have to do something. And if I'm looking for a search result I'd seen before, and I know I'd done a search and it was just someplace in there, it's really hard to find. Most people, I mean, I'm guessing here, have had the thing where they've searched, found something, and they couldn't find it again without clicking a whole bunch. And they're like, was it in 7? Was it in 4? Was it in 3? Right? So maybe there's something we can do that's better there. Maybe we can simplify it. So, the thing about Zen interfaces is the just act without doing. And so here's the maxim. Don't force users to ask for more content. Just give it to them. It really couldn't be simpler than that. Ah, hey. So here's an example. A number of years ago, I guess it was like 2 or 3 years ago now, I decided that RSS was too hard. Like all those silly readers with like the lots and lots of pens on the side, and the idea of that you're reading your RSS as email I thought was silly, because I don't care if I've missed a whole bunch. I just want to sort of keep up to date generally. And so I made this RSS reader as sort of an example of how you can design. And I was struggling with the sort of how do I go back in history problem. And this is now called the River of News style, though it wasn't named anything back then. And the basic idea is that as you use the site, you're just reading along. Yeah, you see what's new. You can't, nothing that you see is interesting here. You keep looking back, right? There's more, right? Now, it certainly didn't load all of this at the beginning. It's just sort of this infinite page. And I don't know if you can see this, but watch the scroll bar. As it gets near the bottom, it just loads a little bit more. So about the time this came out, I spent a while trying to convince your blogger people that you might want to implement something like this. And Google Reader did something that's very similar to this, but I think can be used in a lot more places. I just wish I had patented before Google Reader started using it. Actually, this is a really old idea, right? It's not something, I reinvented it, but it's been used way back when, right? In fact, one of the most depressing things about interface design is that it's all been come up with before. Everybody know graffiti, like the thing that you use on a Palm Pilot? Well, that originally, if you go back and look at, I think it was the 1500s, I can't exactly remember, with the Spanish sailors used a shorthand for communicating. And it has something like an 85% overlap with graffiti, because they're just doing it really short. So it's like nothing you do is new. But that aside, a lot of stuff that people do is really bad, so we can improve it. So this just keeps going, right? Because there's already a semantic meaning with scroll down, and that's go backwards through time, right? There's already a semantic meaning if you're on /dot of going down. That means go backwards through time, right? On Google, it's scrolling down means give me things that are less relevant, right? And you never have to stop and ask for more content. So what do we see? We see people looking at more and more things. In fact, I think on Google there is a thing where at the number of clicks people get per search result starts out with the first result getting lots and sort of dips down, and you get this sort of tail back at the last result, number 10. This gets rid of it nicely. It just actually flattens everything out. So nobody tries to game the system and get number 10. And actually, I spent a while talking to, I'll get to you in 1 second, talking to the New York Times people to see if we could get something like this on their site. And because right now, they paginate their results. So when you're reading an article, you'll get the first page, then the second page, and the third page. And the reason why they do this is twofold. One is because that sort of makes the page load smaller. That's not really a good reason, since they're putting Flash in there now and lots of other big images. And two, and the real one, is because that way they can get more ad loads. But here's the thing. If you're doing this via Ajax, you can just load in a new ad anyway when you get a little bit further down. So I think that's just a silly reason. And the thing is that they say a huge drop, right? The number of people who look at page 1, number of people who look at page 2. Right? Because it's just, there's a cognitive break. You have to think about it. And what happens when you implement something like this? It looks like this, right? You just get, as the article gets more boring, people leave. But there's no huge break. So you get a lot more users looking at your content. So they're actually missing a lot of business here. Sorry, so you had a question?
Yeah, so what if search design number 50 or so was relevant, and before you remember it was in the third tab or so, then...
Well, here's the thing.
Just say it's too difficult to remember that it wasn't...
It's much faster to scan, right? You just sort of start scrolling down. You're like, oh, I remember things that were near there, because that's how people's brains work. You're like, ah, that's where it was.
But here you don't even know where it was, like, within the left side.
That's true. I mean, you have the bar, but also you can use in-page search, right? You can just go Control F and then start finding it. So it's much faster in that sense. And if this were a more advanced system, you'd have things where you could be like, hey, put a big star in the background here, so I can have visual landmarks as I navigate it. But we never got there. So, oops.
Can I ask a Control F question?
Sure.
So if you did Control, so you're on the first page, and you did Control F, but you knew it was, sorry. So if you've done a search before, now you're back there and you're on the first page and you do Control F, but it has to scroll way, way down. Does it load and find it?
No, it doesn't. But that would be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
Good idea. Feel free to implement it. So a friend of mine, I wrote about this, and I said I was going to do this, and I did it, and people were complaining about the scroll bar bouncing up and down and moving around, and thought that people wouldn't find this natural. And so a friend of mine, Pete Ford over at Unspace, did this, but he used it in a project and didn't tell anybody he was doing it. And when he stopped taking data, there had been 16,000 people that looked at his site, and only one of them had noticed. And he had blogged about it and said it was awesome. And so that's great, right? It disappeared. One of the scary things is that I was giving a talk very similar to this at the Ajax Experience a little bit ago as the keynote, and I got to this slide, and somebody raised their hand in the audience, like, yes? And he said, I'm that guy. And it was scary, because in that moment, I realized that people from the internet were there. Right, so when your interaction goes down, your content and users go up. This is cool. That's what I was talking about with the New York Times. So good interface design, like sometimes it's hard to go convince the people above you that interface design really matters. Well, when you have tools like this, you can do that. You can go back and say, yes, we in fact are going to get more users looking at the content that you're spending lots of money making. We get more people looking at the ads if that one doesn't work, right? And it's all about making me don't click. So it's just sort of that one mantra that sort of follows through. So what else can scroll simplify, right? We have this neat interaction. What else can we use it for? So I talked about the tabs before. A guy named Breck Victor wrote back. And it was a little bit embarrassing for me, since I've been a big fan of saying everything should just be in one long page. And he said, well, why not just put tabs in one long big page? And he was exactly right. So here is his solution, right? You come down here, and you open up a new tab. Oops, I did it wrong. I have to hold down a key. No, other key. This is, by the way, running in a virtual machine, because Macs can't do full screen. And I do, as I said, I've done everything in Firefox, and all of a sudden I was unable to do it. So the only way that I could actually get Firefox to go full screen is to run Firefox inside of a virtual machine and full screen that. So anyway, now all the keys are messed up. So anyway, right, here we go. What happened when I opened it up in a new tab? it just opened the tab right below. So that's really cool. This is sort of like the coveted read later feature. You just, wrong key again. You just get all of your tabs in one long page. And once again, you get that great ability of, let's see, we'll just move around between them. That great ability of being able to do Control F across everything that's currently open on your system, right? It's much easier to find things. You don't actually have to teach, like your grandmother, about a new tabs concept because it's just there, right? It's already sort of obvious. It's just below. There's now a physical thought process in like where your pages are. And even better, it solves that whole obnoxious problem of not having enough space to write out the tab name across the top because you're using that space wisely, right? So you can actually now just write everything out. So this is pretty smart. Normally around here, people will ask me, how does this fit with the thing I was showing before, where the page kept getting longer and longer and longer? And that's a good question. So I don't know. I think this is pretty cool. I'm actually right now working on getting an extension to make this happen in Firefox and see what we can start doing about getting this out in the real world, because it's such a neat solution to the problem, right? It's clever, and it's using something you already know how to do. This is about reducing interaction. So we've actually gotten rid of a lot of interaction here. That's cool. So actually, the iPhone could sort of take this example, right? You right now have to zoom out, like press a special button to go see your tabs. Why can't you just, if you keep going to the left, why doesn't it just show you your other tabs, right? They already have this like awesome physical space, and then they break it in weird ways. They could make it actually much easier to use if they sort of embrace the fact that they're working around in a physical space. So take your metaphors and run with them. So that's, if you want to go learn more about his stuff, go there. The other point I want to bring up is that lowering interaction doesn't actually have to mean that you're making your site boring, right? I'm not talking about just having lots and lots and lots of text that runs all the way to the edges of your screen. There's other things you can do. So I don't know how many people have seen this. I think it's pretty cool. Let's find Chicago. And all it has is a zoom in and a zoom out. It has, I mean, it clearly does less than your Google Maps, but on the other hand, it's much, the interface is much simpler. It's just a zoom in and a zoom out. That's all. Of course, and annoyingly enough, you can change the direction of the compass, which rotates, which I think is one of the silliest features I've seen, because you can go like this. I hope you all are enjoying your lunch, or were. But I think that's cool, right? And this is the first example in my sort of list. I think I have 3 here of sort of zooming interfaces, where it just uses this analogy of you zoom in, zoom out to get someplace. Like, where can we take that analogy? It's very similar to scrolling, but sort of in the 3rd dimension, right? And we simplify it. So I lived in Chicago until very, very recently, like 4 or 5 days ago. And I would always commute from around here to up there near Belmont. And I had used the trip planner on their website, the CTA website, to find my bus or my train. And it told me to take the red line. So I did, and it would take me something like 45 minutes to get there because the red line was under construction and it wasn't so great. I was also really cold, so I just would get on it and go and try not to shiver. Of course, here, I guess, like the definition of bad weather is the sun went behind a cloud for a little bit. I sympathize with you guys. It wasn't until I looked at a paper map that I realized there was a bus that went right from my door, right to the door of my work, and it took 20 minutes, right? And I'd been doing this for the last 10, I don't know, a month and a half. And so there's something missing, right? All that interaction involved in selecting my destination, my ending, it had actually destroyed my ability to actually find the thing that I wanted. So I was like, okay, well, I can do better. I'm just going to take that physical map we had and translate it onto the computer, right? And I'm trying to do it in the most dumb way possible. So if I want to go see more of Hyde Park, which is where the University of Chicago is, I just move my cursor over it and I get to see it. It zooms in and zooms out automatically. Right? And it's quite nice. And if I want to come look downtown, I just move my cursor over here. I see it. That's where I used to live. Move outside. Oops. It's hard to control from this weird angle. And there we go, right? Just taking that really simple thing of I zoom in, zoom out, make it a little bit automatic. And I actually get a map which is much more useful than the thing that they've created, which if you look at it, you have to you get a little image and you have to click up or click down and click in and zoom out, right? It's just making things less interactive. And yet, it's not really that boring. So what else can we do with zooming? And I'm going to come back to this because I'm going to hold you guys for a task for calendar. And I don't know who here is responsible for it, but I think you might not want to be shortly. So here is a way of doing calendar that uses the same sort of zooming metaphor, right? So we can come over here and see hey, here's March. Here's February, and I want to zoom in and see these particular things. You can zoom out by doing this awesome little gesture here. You can zoom in by that. And all of a sudden, I get to see as many things as I want per day. It's sort of cool, right? And it's very clear what I want to do when I want to see more. I just zoom out a little bit. Right? Here's 2008. Want to see a little bit more? I zoom out a little bit more. Right? Now, if this was a full-featured thing, you could see everything. And now I don't need those sort of today, next week, next year. I don't need to click on those little buttons left and right in Google Calendar. There's next year, next year, next year, next year, next year, right? When I know it's far away, I can just zoom out, zoom in. It's a very simple metaphor that has a lot to it. And to get back, it's quite fast. Right? So anything on that calendar in the entire 21st century could be accessed almost instantaneously, as fast as I just did back to get to the 29th of February of 2008. How cool is that, right?
Excuse me, what do you do to zoom in?
What?
What's the signal for zoom in?
I actually just clicked on the thing I wanted to zoom in on. This, by the way, is made by a company called Social Helix. And they're doing some really neat things with this sort of zooming stuff. And I should have put it up on a slide what their address is, but it's socialhelix.com. And they have a whole bunch of neat features. They have this sort of counterclockwise spiral thing with your mouse, which lets you zoom out, which I quite like. It works very well on a tablet PC and zoom in. So that's pretty cool. And you know what's even cooler about it? When I make the screen smaller, to fit on a mobile device, guess what? It works just as well. Actually, you can go pretty far in here.
Wow.
Not so useful. So I don't know. I think taking this sort of really simple metaphor, which I started showing you with zooming in and zooming out, and sort of exploring where you can go with it, you can get a lot. It's not boring, but you've reduced a lot of interaction. So keep this in mind. Let's see how much time I have. As I sort of continue on into the Google Calendar stuff. So these are Zen Internet applications. What aren't ZIAs? And I'm actually going to use, I think, my favorite UI insult. I have two. One of them isn't so much UI. It's just that, oh yeah, well, you're not Turing complete. But my favorite UI one is your personality is nothing but a thin veneer over your underlying implementation. How many people here have ever worked in enterprise software at all? Right? So you'll probably remember seeing that your interface is a very small shim over your database, right? It's just pretty much there are forms in your database, and then you have forms in your interface, right? This is not a great way of designing, right? People do not think in forms, right? If I asked one of you what is your name? What is your birth date? Where do you live? And you went down this sort of thing, what is your phone number? Then, that's not a great way of interacting. It's even worse when I have to ask you to talk talk about your boyfriend or husband or significant other, and talk about them for, I don't know, say 15 seconds without mentioning their gender. Or anything that would like indicate their gender. Can you do it?
My significant other stays home with the kids. He.
Right, okay. Well, a lot of our interfaces actually go through this sort of process of entering forms, sort of making that assumption where they won't let you know or talk about it. It's a very inhumane, sort of dehumanizing way of interacting with people, right? So, I don't know, this is part of the your personality is nothing but a thin veneer over your underlying implementation. And we'll see that you get to use this right here, right? This is not a very good way of entering data. Now, you guys do better with your like quick add box, although there's another company that does better, which is 30 boxes, and I'll come back to that. But if you also stop and think about that sort of my point of interaction seduction, well, there's a lot of interaction that goes on here, a whole bunch, and not all of it, and most of it, in fact, is stuff you don't care about, right? One of my other favorite adages in the interface world is every time you ask the user to make a decision they don't care about, you have failed as a designer. My favorite example of this is Windows, when you do a search, right? And the first time you do a search on your Windows box, a dialog box comes up and says, hey, user, guess what? You have to make a choice. Would you like, check this out, would you like to do a search that is slow but takes up lots of hard drive space, or right? That's one choice. You can do it, slow but doesn't take up hard drive space, or you can make it fast but it will take up hard drive space. So slow slow or use your hard drive space. Which one? Choose right now. You're like, I am a user. I don't care. Just work for me, right? Like, don't make me choose between the worst of two evils, because those are your only choice. It's sort of like when you get those things. It's like, would you like to, I don't know, restart? Okay, cancel. And you're like, what does cancel do? So this is bad, right? This is a lot of interaction, and it looks just like your database. And there are better ways to represent forms. So the first one, well, actually, I think I'll come back to this in this, so one way here is that to do almost everything in 30 boxes, you type into this little box, right? And that's neat. You can just say, 7 p.m. dinner with ACJ. So that's similar to your guys. But you can do something a lot more. You can then start typing in somebody's email address, and that'll add them into the box, right? And then you can then share that event with them. And I'm trying to remember all the other really neat things you can do inside of here. Probably if you start typing about weather, or putting in a date, it'll tell you about the weather. It has a whole bunch of functionality that's all wrapped up inside of this little search box. Sound familiar? And even so one of the things that I think is fundamentally wrong with the Google Calendar is, besides the whole having all those little buttons you have to click back and forth on, is that I type in 7 p.m. dinner with ACJ, and it misinterprets me because natural language processing is hard. That's okay. What's not okay is that then to fix that mistake, I have to go through that full form, right? I have to not only click on the event and then click edit, then I get brought to a new page which brings up the form. This is a lot of interaction that doesn't need to be there, right? Then I have to go figure it out, and it's an entirely different form of information than I had before, which I just typed it out. Why can't I just edit that original field that I had, and it tells me what it thinks I've typed, right? That'd be a much better way of doing it. It's just essentially you're making a tight feedback loop of what I type in a box to what the computer thinks I'm doing so I can fix it, right? Because natural language processing is in fact hard. And this is all a part of a theme that I talk a lot about, which is natural language interfaces or natural language command lines. And it's something that if you go to my site, humanized.com, you can see that we have something which works across all your applications to let you do things like adding maps or spell checking or translating to German. In the same way that you do sort of your Google thing, where you type what you want to find, you type what you want to do. So there's a lot to be explored here, but in particular, right, it's always about reducing interaction. I guess there's one more example that I'd put in here before I get to this slide. And that is, have you guys seen the BART planner, the BART trip planner? The website. Have you seen the widget for dashboard? Now that I'm on a Mac, I really should have installed it, but I didn't think of that. So the trip planner, you have to enter your information, start time, drop-down list, end time, drop-down list. If you don't know exactly what it's called or you know it by a different name, you can't find it. If you're new here, it's very difficult to find. There's no sort of spatial recognition there. It's pretty inhumane, but it's really easy to code in forms. So what the BART widget does, and this is another thing by Brett Victor, is that it gives you a map with a to and a from button, and you drop it on the ones you want to go to. Then it shows you a list of the trains that are coming in a great sort of Tufty-style way. And it's so easy, right? It feels like there's nothing there. Again, there's almost always a better way to represent a form. So whenever you see a form, that's generally lazy design. So we're back here, the fundamental web tension, with boring and annoying. We figured out that the answer to this is by looking at content, right? The answer to making something that's not boring, that's not annoying, the answer to making interfaces is by focusing on content, and by focusing on content, getting rid of interaction. So do not make me click, right? Why is Google Search great? It doesn't make me click. Why is Google Calendar bad? It makes me click all the time, right? It's a really simple metric to determine how well you're doing. So here's my shameless plug. You can come talk to me, and that's it. So feel free to ask questions, to badger me. Sure.
So great talk, first of all. I was sort of curious about the speech as a natural way of providing input for anybody. Like, it's not a lot more natural for me to say what I want rather than scroll through a long list of pages and find what I actually want. So why hasn't speech actually evolved as one of the natural ways of input and, say, designing more user interaction around speech?
So let me see if I can understand what you said. You're saying that speech isn't a good form of input? Or that you don't find that natural?
It's very, very natural.
Oh, that is very
I don't
natural.
see a lot of innovation around it.
Certainly. And I think it's because two things. One, it's hard. And our technology is getting better. And our speed is getting better. And two, it's because people sort of lose their head when they start thinking about speech as a form of interface. And they immediately jump to speech is a good form of input and output. But we know that speech, speech as output, because it's not random access, isn't good. But for whatever reason, people like to combine those two. And they sort of go that way. And so all those attempts before to have speech-based interfaces use it for something it's good at, but also something it's really bad at. And nobody seems to realize that just input would be great, right? And then having output on a visual display, that would work wonderfully. And that's actually one of the things that we've been playing around with, that you can type, and as soon as you have sort of I can type to do something, it makes a lot of sense to then have I can say to do the exact same thing. So I guess that's the answer to your question. Sure.
One of the sort of tenets that we're ingrained with is that recognition is easier than recall.
Right.
And that seems to be a direct contradiction to the idea of a command line type of interface. And you listed what you can type into the Google search box and said, well, maybe I missed a couple. What can you do with 30 boxes? You can't think of them all offhand.
That's right.
So the ones you do know, and if you take the time to learn, you can fly through it.
Right.
But if you come into it fresh and you don't know what you can do, you don't know if you're using 90% of the features or 1%, you don't know what you don't know, to paraphrase one of our great leaders.
No, that's a great point, and definitely deserves to be talked about. So I guess there are three answers, and we'll see if I can remember all three by the time I'm done talking. One is that Word, right, has, what the top 10 requests, the top what is the statistic? 90% of the requested features for Word are features that are already in Word. Which says something, which says that this problem, even if you're going the full-blown graphical route with visual reminders, is not easy. But also says that perhaps the way we do our graphical reminders right now are not very good. So that's number one. Number two is that when you is the sort of the myth of designing for beginner and expert. Is that most people think like you need to have one interface for beginner and one interface for expert. And they sort of like GUIs are for beginners, command lines are for experts. But I think that's sort of false, right? That if you design really well, then you can have the same interface for beginner or for expert. So in the case of Google or 30 boxes, like your beginner won't use all of those features, but they'll still be using the same interface. And as they learn in a linear fashion how to do one thing at a time, then they become experts in the system. But there's no, there's no distinction between I'm using a menu and I'm using a keyboard shortcut, right? It's the exact same interface. So which is to say that there will be a linear learning process for an interface of that functionality. And the last one, to answer your question quite directly, is that you need to take advantage of recall. Wow, my brain is turned off. Recognition, thank you. And so you have to give people hints as they use the system. I wish I had Enso running right now so you could see it going, but you need to do things like auto-suggest. So as you start typing spell check, SP, it'll list all the command names that have to do with SP, like spell check, right? And as you start typing along in the 30 boxes calendar, oh wow. No, bad, there we go. As you type along in the 30 boxes, they do things where they'll give you hints, like you might want to do this thing now. And it doesn't get in your way. It's not like Clip, who's like, I see you're making a lolcat, let me help you, right? This one instead is just sort of tacit, ambient help as you go along. So you need to take advantage of both of those. So I guess the part answer is one is that yes, there will be a learning curve and somebody won't know everything at the beginning. But two, that's okay because you can sort of step them along one thing at a time and there's always just one thing they have to learn, not a whole new mechanism. Guido? Hey, Guido.
You make it seem so easy. Excuse me. You make it seem so easy. In my experience, maybe I'm just stupid when it comes to graphics design. It's really hard to just implement all those very sensible suggestions you're making. I'm wondering if there isn't something you can do by providing libraries or toolkits, because the existing toolkits all sort of emulate the bad way of doing things.
That's unfortunately right, and something I don't know exactly how to solve. Because we have this sort of cycle, and we saw it on the web, right? Where originally we were doing our desktop stuff, and we had these very large, very powerful toolkits that made doing this thing you'd already done very easy, right? We had this sort of what I call the toolkit straitjacket. And then we hit the web, and all of a sudden we didn't have powerful tools to make websites. So we saw a whole bunch of people trying to do all sorts of new things because it was as hard to make something new as it was to make something that they'd seen before. So people felt that they had the liberty to make it. This is why we see that there are great interfaces in games, because they have the liberty to make new interfaces and to do the thing they want because it's just as hard. They have to code it from scratch anyway. And sort of my answer is yes, we need better toolkits. Yes, we need widget libraries like jQuery, which makes doing things easy. But a lot of this in the real world comes down to realizing that you have to do a lot of your UI development really far upstream. That if you wait till the end to try to do visual design, if you're not doing it during requirements gathering, as a product, it's just not going to happen. So unfortunately, the answer is no, it's not easy at the moment. It really takes work and it really takes dedication, but I think the rewards are clear and they pay off well, and if you do it upstream enough, it becomes possible to do. To get a good designer involved really early on, one who doesn't just choose color blue. So I wish there was a silver bullet, but there isn't. Hopefully, I mean, actually the web is great because it really does make making all of these things much faster. And it's much easier to do all the kinds of of stuff I have been here on the web and not in the desktop world. So we're better than we used to be.
So on the theme of reducing interaction, so on the search box, when I'm looking for an answer to a question, whether in Mountain View today, I totally agree with you, right? Provide the answer and not a link which gives you the answer. But what about exploratory tasks, like traveling to London, and I have so many different things I want to look for. I want to look for tickets, I want to look for a hotel, things to do. And even one of those, like things to do, it might be museums, it might be London Eye, it might be so on and so forth, right? There's a hierarchy of things, and I want all of them. It's not like at this point, I want one. So what's a good...
Well, I think there are actually two sort of fundamental modes to interacting, right? There's searching and then there's browsing. Searching is I know exactly what it is that I want, right? So if I was redesigning sort of the Expedias of the world, I'd be like, well, I just want a search box and type, I'm going from here to there on such and such a date. Search, done, right? I don't want to interact. Browsing is different. Browsing means I don't really know what it is I want to do. So in that case, you're going to be using lots of visuals or lots of sort of more interactive things, being like, hey, well, by interactive, I mean not lots of clicking, but a lot more sort of processing of information to get to where you want to be. So, I mean, ideally, I guess the thing you'd want to do is to have somebody just say, like, here's your itinerary, what don't you like about it? But that's not going to happen.
And there are two choices, right? You could have a cluttered page with, okay, here are things to do, and here are information about tickets, information about hotels, blah, blah, like 6 different boxes in there.
Sure.
Or you have like 6 links. Did you mean you wanted to look for things to do, or did you mean you wanted to buy tickets?
That's right.
And neither of those seem very optimal. It's like,
that's right. I think that's exactly right. So you're going to have to design for those 2 different things, and you're going to get 2 different looking interfaces to accommodate them. Just like you get essentially the difference between moving around in that zooming space and just typing to find where I want it to be.
Hi, I have a question about scrolling versus clicking. So I totally see your point about offering content when it comes to maybe content that could be interesting, but say it's help content specifically, and you're offering specific, say you have you use Firefox or you use IE or whatever other browser. As a user, for example, I don't care if, what is the content about IE if I use Firefox, right? So I can see the advantage of using a link there. So, do you use IE, click here, go to the IE information rather than scrolling through the whole page, and read the whole information? What's your take on that?
Well, 1, you should auto-detect that anyway. But abstracting from your particulars, in general, I think it's better to have it all on one page anyway, so you can find it faster, right? To have all of those questions highlighted, so you can use Control F and then do clever hiding, like just have people, if you want to drop people into what are they called, an anchor, right, to that part of the page. Like putting information, I mean, there's always a tension between hiding information to make it easier. I mean, that's what wizards do, but everybody just hits next, 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 next anyway, versus giving people information overload. And a lot of that is sort of intensive information architecture and figuring it out. So I don't know if there's like an answer I can just be like, this is the answer. But I generally find that people skew far too much towards you have to click to go someplace, rather than I'm going to give you enough information on one page. And so that's more of the point, that in interface design, it's always an exercise of compromise. But there's that skew. So I don't know if that makes sense.
I have a question about the Control F issue. You're talking about that a lot as an answer, that people can just use the Control F, but I don't think my grandparents know that exists or would ever possibly learn that exists. I don't think my dad knows that exists. I mean, other than kind of in this industry, I'm not sure how you expect people to find that and use that as an alternative to scrolling.
Sure. So I guess I would put it 2 ways. One, I think that's a failure of the browsers, right? Like we need to do a better job of getting people to use and to make it easier to find ways of doing in-page search because it's such a powerful tool. The other thing I guess I'd say, sorry, I had it in my mind a second ago, is that just because it isn't like visible or obvious, right? People talk in this world a lot about affordances, right? It has to be visually there, otherwise people will miss it. Did I say fast? Yeah, it was. To take one really simple example, the iPhone. People sort of hail it as this awesome bit of innovation, which is incredibly intuitive, i.e. familiar, that nobody knows, that everybody knows how to use instinctively. You pick it up and you use it. But that's not really true. Nobody would pick it up and do this sort of pinch thing. That's not a natural thing. Why does everybody know to do that? Why does it feel familiar? It's because, guess what? They spent millions and millions and millions of dollars running advertisements showing people doing this. So that by the time you got one, of course you knew how to do this. So remember when they were testing the mouse originally. They sat somebody down in front of the mouse. This is a story that my father would tell me. They sat somebody down in front of the mouse. She'd been using the command line for years at that point. And asked her to use it, right? Didn't say anything, just did the thing you do in interface design, which is you sit back and you try really hard not to tell your user that they're dumb, as they can't use your interface. And so what did you do? She picked up the mouse and tried to move it around, right? And that didn't work. Then she flipped it over and was like, oh, hey, look, it's a ball. I'll roll it. Of course, it had disconnected from its sensor, so that didn't work. She tried putting it on the screen. That didn't work. She even did the Scotty thing. She's like, hello, computer. That didn't work, right? And she gave up. She's like, I can't use this. Then all it took was somebody moving the mouse a little bit for her, and then she could use it, right? So perhaps what we need to be doing on the browser side is a little bit of outreach, right? We need to be doing that Apple thing, doing that thing that games do where we have tutorials, right? That lead you through, like, this is how you do things. I think that's the answer, that search is such a fundamental thing, preaching to the choir, is such a fundamental thing that perhaps we need to be teaching people how to do that in the page. And that's a worthwhile thing to do.
Okay. And I can add something to this.
Please.
Yeah. As I remember from the Human Interface book, Jeff describes a computer called Cat or something like that, in which to search something you just press a key on the keyboard and then start to type in what you need to search. So it's like a kind of incremental search implemented.
That's exactly right. And so he's right. If I had my way, if Jeff had had his way, that search would be the intrinsic thing for getting around on the computer, would be a fundamental action, right? And it's pretty cool, right? Like if you do tests, it takes 3.5 seconds to move your cursor to a screen, like to a character on the screen and click and go there, right? With something like this incremental search, what he called leap, you just hold any key, type where you want to go. So if you want to go to the V and over, you type V, E, and it'll be there. That takes 1.5 seconds. That's for on-screen. So if you multiply that, actually, by the amount of time you save, by the number of people, or per hour, times the number of hours in a day, times the number of people in the US, and then you calculate the average cost of employing those people for that time, just by saving that little bit of time, which gets multiplied so much, that would save the US, if we fixed it, more money than spam costs us right now, right? Because it's such a fundamental action. So I think that's a really good point. Thank you for reminding me that, you know, if we're smart about it and we make search into a fundamental thing, then we don't have that problem anymore.
Just really quick, since you brought up Jeff,
Sure.
when I was coming here, I hadn't read the synopsis and didn't know who you were, and then I saw your name. I was like, oh, Raskin. I wonder if that's Jeff's son. And sure enough, I looked you up on Wikipedia, and he spoke here in this very room almost 4 years ago. So it's really neat seeing you up here. You're a brilliant speaker and did a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, as I was saying before, like when I was young, I got carried, like most kids got carried around in a stroller. I got carried around in the original Macintosh carry case. So it was like not really a choice, sort of like my destiny to do something like this, I guess.
Great.
But thanks.